we can't keep ourselves safe. If you're in that place, my recommendation to you, my professional recommendation is you need to go get help. And I don't say that because, you know, it's an other thing that it's somebody else. It's something that I struggle with. And so usually when I do these presentations, I share my own personal story. And I was a kid that grew up in a lot of traumas. So many of you either working with children that have experienced trauma or you have trauma yourself. I grew up in a house with a lot of traumas. So I had an abusive alcoholic stepdad. My childhood was very similar to some of you where, you know, your growing up experience isn't one where you have a lot of friends over. You try to avoid it because the unpredictability of your setting, of what your house is going to look like. So because of those traumas, I was already predisposed to a lot of stuff. By the time I was 12 years old, it was the first time that I thought I wanted to die. Now, I didn't really want to die. It's called suicidal ambivalence. We want the pain to be over, and there's a big, big difference. So fast forward to adulthood, being an adult, especially when I was younger, was really, really hard. So I have been on medication, and I have done therapy most of my adult life. And I'll tell you why. I like to be happy. There's value in life. If I had asthma, I would not walk around saying, I can't breathe. I'm not going to do a nebulizer because those people are just weak. That doesn't make sense, right? So when we talk about mental health stuff, it's medical condition. It's a medical condition that nobody can control anymore than they can control diabetes, then they can control asthma, then they can control heart disease. So if we, as we're launching into our little talk here today, if you know that you're not in a good place, getting help is actually a sign of strength. It's absolutely not a sign of weakness. And so just be really, really mindful of that with the circumstances that they are right now, some of us, our financial situations are being pressed, our employment situations are being pressed. And so we just want to really be mindful of that. To the or an admin that are on this, I'm not checking that chat because every time I open the chat, it's going to minimize my screen. So if there's anything that I need to be aware of, you know, feel free to chime in. But what I'll say to all of you is if you have questions, throw them into the chat, and then I'm saving time at the end and I'll go through and answer all your questions. So do not hesitate to fill up that chat with questions. It gives me something to do and doesn't make me look like a fool at the end. So here's what we need to know, folks. And this is stuff that we don't always learn as we grow up, and it's really, really good information. So your brain is this vital, very fragile, yet strong, it can be resilient organ. You only get one at it, and if you mess it up, that can have long-term impacts. So our brain stress, when you look at that score on the quiz, when I took mine, my stress level was highest, my anxiety was next, and my depression was low. Had I taken that same quiz, what about 6 weeks ago, 5 weeks ago, it would have looked very different. Folks, here's an impression of me when this all hit, this COVID thing hit. I was freaking out. I was having, or very close to having panic attacks. I was not sleeping well. I was really, really struggling. I was scared. I was unsure. I was confused. And many of you can relate to that too. I reached out to my doc, my psych, and I said, hey, what I'm on now normally works, but right now it's not working. You're going to have to give me something else. And so we up my meds. And then I do therapy, telehealth every week, and it's helped tremendously. So if you're looking at some of your scores and you're like, oh, I didn't even realize how high they were, or hey, not surprising they're that high. When they're high, though, we have to recognize warning sign, because your brain is surrounded by a whole bunch of stuff in your head. And one of those pieces is cortisol. Cortisol is a response that comes from our glands, and it's what happens when we start to feel stressed. Now, anything in moderation is okay, but stress can come from a variety of different things. And with time, the more cortisol that's on our brain, the more it starts to change how our brain is functioning. And I think I have a couple of slides on that coming up here. Let's see, why can't I forward this? There we go, perfect. So there are some of your neurons that are firing away in your brain. So neurons are those things, those pathways that send messages around your brain. And they're the things that, it'd be like if we were all sitting in a room and we were just calmly throwing some beach balls. When we're stressed, that calm catch or beach ball catch goes into survival mode. What it means is certain parts of our brain start to gain strength and the other parts of our brain start to weaken, or those neurons can even die off. It's called neural pruning. The problem with that is that some of those parts that are weakening are critical parts of our brains that we need. The other problem is some of those parts that are gaining strength mean that they're always going to have strength and they're going to be functioning at higher levels than we need them to. So this is impacting parts of your brain like your frontal lobes, and those impact things like your executive functioning skills. So how well are you processing information, your ability to make decisions, problem solving. It's also impacting some emotional regulation. So how well are we able to deal with all of our feelings, impulsivity. So how impulsive are we? And you may see this with some of the young people that you're working with, or you have been, or you will be working with too. So ultimately, if you look on the bottom picture, some of those damaged neurons impact our brain. And the longer we're exposed to it, the more damage it causes. Now, here's the other kicker that you really need to know, is that damage done to your neurons can also be inherited to your children and your grandchildren. So damage that we do to our bodies in a variety of ways gets passed on. So we have to be very mindful and very intentional that we do not allow our brains to just always drown in cortisol and just go, well, it's just stress. I mean, that's just my life. You know, it's just the way it's going to be. It doesn't have to be. And so we're going to kind of unpack that a little bit and dive into that now. So another impact, I guess, of cortisol that we really need to talk about is it doesn't just impact your brain, because your brain controls the rest of your body. So it can increase your likelihood of a weakened immune system. And right now we need our immune systems to be functioning at high levels. Heart disease, blood pressure, blood sugar, digestive issues. If you really want to go down a really neat rabbit hole, the research continues to come out showing how our gut health impacts our brain health. So what we eat, the bacteria that's growing in our gut, is contributing to how our brain is functioning. So we want to be really mindful of that too, that we're putting good things into our bodies. And then of course, nerve issues and anxiety, depression, headaches, all that kind of stuff too. So the more cortisol, the increased likelihood of some of these negative mental and physical health outcomes. So here are some things to watch out for, especially right now, given COVID. If you're excessively watching news or social media, those can be what we call cortisol triggers. So those are triggering the cortisol. I've gotten to the point where I try to flip on the news once in a day. Occasionally I'll do it twice, but no more than that. And it's usually in the evening. I'll watch maybe the evening news. I took Facebook off of my phone because I was obsessing on it. So now it's just on my computer, and I really look at it maybe once a day, maybe, and I'm way healthier because of it. The reason is that even though people in my life are well-intentioned and trying to post things that they think are relevant, it stresses me out. It stresses me out to see and hear things that are happening on a daily basis. Just because when I'm stressed, right, I don't have good emotional regulation on that. So if you post that you're out at the park with all your friends, you bring 25 people over, I know that I don't have the regulation right now to deal with that. And so I look at it and you stress me out. So it's easier for me. I can't control what other people do, but I can control what I have access to. So give yourself good boundaries with that. If you're not sleeping well right now, your appetite, for me, stress eating is a fave. That said, I know I have to be really careful because, you know, I'm not just sitting here. I try to go on walks and things like that, but it could be really easy for me to use food to cope, and I need to replace it with a healthier coping skill. So for me, walking, or I read, or I do something else to disrupt when my brain starts to get stressed out. Irritability is one of the most common signs of anxiety. We sometimes think anxiety just means somebody's going to be having a panic attack in the corner, and that's not true. One of the reasons that I knew that my anxiety was high when this all happened is, especially with my kids, I was really irritable. And part of it is my brain was overwhelmed and overloaded. And when your brain is overwhelmed and overloaded, it's really hard for it to function in a calm way to then discern, well, why am I feeling this way? And to communicate effectively. And sometimes what we get instead is irritability. And you see that with the kids that you work with too. So kids that you work with, you know, we would love as adults for them to turn, especially those of you working with little ones. Wouldn't it be great if your little 4-year-old turned to you and said, excuse me, Jane, I'd like you to know that today I'm very anxious and it's manifesting itself in anger. Can you please forgive me? What kid does that? Instead, they launch a toy at your head, right? And that launching of that toy, and maybe they're yelling at you, is communicating. You might not like how they're communicating, but they're still communicating. And in that moment, they might be communicating that what they see going on in the world around them is too much, and they're anxious. Headaches and stomach aches, those are psychosomatic symptoms, and those usually mean our anxiety is high too. Our stress level is really high. We want to start to pay attention in ourselves and those around us, though, when we start to withdraw and isolate from peers. Now, clearly we can't physically be with peers right now, but if we're still choosing, you know, digitally, I don't want to talk to my friends, I'm not texting my friends, I'm feeling really hopeless, this isn't going to get better. You know, and if you're in a situation right now where your finances are being impacted, your employment's being impacted, your housing might be impacted, those are very real things, but I really want you to hear me when I say that we will get through this, and it might not be perfect and it might not be pretty on the way, but there is help to help get you through. And so at the end of this, I'll give you my email, or I'll give you my our website for our org. And if any of you are needing specific help in trying to navigate things, I want you to reach out to me, because you are really valued. You're working with kids, and some of you are working with kids that are in challenging situations too, and they need you. And so we're going to do everything we can to make sure that you're healthy and happy. There was a research study that came out from a researcher at ISU in the beginning of April, and they're projecting that there will be 50,000 additional suicides as a result of COVID. So we know that the mental health impact will far outlast the virus. And this isn't just with adults, this is with young people too. So we're all a team on this. And we need to make sure that in order to take care of other people, you have to take care of yourself first. You can't take care of other people's babies if you aren't taking care of yourself first. So you think about on an airplane, they say, put your mask on first and then put the mask of the person next to you on second. There's a reason for that, because if you pass out because you have no oxygen, you can't put anybody else's masks on around you. So I want you today to put your mask on as we head forth into this. Oops. So people ask a lot of times about suicide rates, and Jen, where did these come from? We never had these as problems. And actually we've always had this as a problem, but we do see historically across stressful periods of time an uptick of that. So when we think about the 20s before the Great Depression, the suicide rate was 12.1. It's still higher than we wanted, but it's fairly low. Then we had the stock market crash, and we had the Great Depression, and we saw suicides go up to 18.1. So that means they're far more common. But then even after that, we still saw them at 15.4, which means they're higher than they started. And we're going to probably see a similar impact because of COVID. So here's what we know right now. Right now, before this happened, we were at about a 14.8 rate, and that's pretty high. We see that in Iowa, we have a higher rate, and we have a higher rate with our agricultural professions, so farmers, fishers. They say right now that teachers' rates are fairly low, but I would argue that, and we see some changing research on that. So if you're working with young people, there's some redeeming pieces in that, some intrinsic motivation to that, but we still have to be very, very cautious, because any of the kids, their traumas that we're working with, we also pick that up too. So anybody you come across, you take a little piece of them, and we call that vicarious traumatization. So if you're working with kids that are coming from some really rough situations, you're not immune to that. You take some of that with you, and you have to be careful of that and have some good boundaries in that, because that's very, very stressful. So here's what we know. It's very early with COVID. You know, the data isn't, we haven't been in this for any length of time, but we do know that we have a recipe for disaster brewing. So it's not a matter of if, but a matter of when. And we have seen an increase in some hotline phone calls, and there is some data in Tennessee. So thinking about your own stress, that's why I share my story with you too, because there's no shame in being stressed out given the current circumstances. What we want to do though is we want to kind of remove some of that stress, some of that cortisol, so that we are able to continue to function and get through without getting into a crisis. Some of you may find this interesting. They did a research study just at the beginning of COVID, and it's not surprising, right? And I think it mimics a lot of the results of the quiz that we just took, that people are more stressed out. They're feeling more anxious. They're worried about family members. They're worried about friends. They're feeling their own mental health being impacted. So if right now you're feeling overwhelmed, please know you're amongst the rest of the world and also feeling more stressed and more anxious. And so we have to be really intentional about what are we going to do to take some of that cortisol out of our heads, because it's going to otherwise really impact our brain functioning. So this is in Iowa. This is an Iowa-friendly one. This is out of it's called Community Crisis Services. They have a chat, iowacrisischat.org, and then they have a number you can call or text. I know that when I've had suicidal thoughts in the past, and folks, it's not just something that comes and goes. And here's the best kept secret, is that most people have had suicidal thoughts at some point in their life. We just don't talk about it, right? We don't wear a sign. So if you're in a place that's not such a good place, please reach out to these folks. They're amazing folks. And it's a normal person sitting on the other side of the computer or the phone that is just there to talk to you and chat with you. It isn't some scary process. They don't take your exact name and address and broadcast it across the news. Nobody knows when you need to reach out, and there's no shame in reaching out. You're under a lot of stress and circumstances that are beyond stressful and hard. And living life on a good day is really, really hard. So let's talk about how we can protect our emotional health. One of the things that we know that our brains need to function is oxygen. And so we want to give our brains high levels of opportunity to get oxygen. There is $1 billion industry, self-care industry, that would tell you in order to get self-care, you have to buy some product, or you have to use this candle, or you have to do this face mask, or you have to take a bath with some bubbly fizzy thing in it. And yeah, I mean, all those are great, but that isn't necessarily what self-care is. Self-care can be as simple as, all right, right now, I want you to just take 3 deep breaths with me, and we're going to legit do this. Now, you're on the other side of screen. I don't care if you really do it, to be honest. That's on you, but I do care about how your brain is functioning, and so I want you to just trust me for this. Just trust me for 3 deep breaths, okay? So here we go. Deep breath, and I want you to fill up your lungs, and I want you to feel as if there are balloons in your lungs. When you get to the top of that inhale, you're going to hold it just for a couple of seconds, and then you're going to exhale as deeply and out as far as you can to deflate those balloons. We're going to do it 3 times. Here we go. Ready? First inhale. Hold it. Now force a really nice hard exhale. Deflate those balloons. Inhale number 2. Hold it. Exhale. Last one. Inhale. Hold it. Exhale. Now, I sure hope that you did do this, because putting that amount of oxygen to your brain is not something that your brain is normally used to getting. But those of you that did it, you just burnt a lot of the stress hormones that are surrounding your mind right now. You just did yourself an immense favor, and it's going to have an impact on how you function for the rest of the day. You do not have to sit in a 2-hour yoga or meditation session to have noticeable impact on how well your brain feels. So there's a lot of apps. There's a lot of free apps. There's some that you can get at a cost. Some that I recommend are Calm. Headspace has free meditations every day. And then there's a really, really good app that a student told me about called Sanvelo. So if you're looking for some apps to put on your phone, I would recommend those. Headspace is wonderful because it offers really short meditations. You can do it down as short as a minute, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes. You can do all sorts of increments. I try to give myself at least a couple of minutes a day. Again, you don't have to do 2 hours because I recognize time is an issue, but give yourself something. Give yourself, even if it's before you get out of bed, don't pick up your phone and check your email. Give yourself just a few minutes of laying there, stare at your ceiling, and just breathe. Because what you're doing is you're starting to burn off some of that cortisol on your brain before you even start your day. Do the same thing before you go to bed. Those of you that are struggling to sleep, it's part of the reason is because your cortisol is going and your cortisol is out of control. You have so much cortisol in your brain that your brain can't slow itself down to function to fall asleep. There are wonderful apps for that too. I'm the queen of apps. Calm has some good sleep apps. There's one called Relax Melodies, and it has brain waves that you can toggle that are sleep waves. And so there's some free ones, and I use one almost every night. And y'all, I'm one of the hardest people to get to sleep, but this works for me. It helps soothe my brain, and it's the brain waves piece. Make sure that you go outside. Exercise, meditation are two of the top ways to help bring cortisol down in our brain because you're burning that stress hormone. I'll tell you though, folks, I don't want you to leave this and be like, okay, my new self-care plan is I'm gonna run 10 miles every day. If that isn't something that makes sense for you. If I said that for me, I would not only not run those 10 miles in a day, I would feel guilty that I wasn't running those, which only increases the cortisol. Then I'd probably go eat a pie or something to counter it. It only makes my situation worse. So you're going to do something that makes sense for you. For me, I try to go on a daily walk. Do I do it every day? No. I come up with just as many as excuses as you probably do too. But what I really do try to do is give myself some opportunities to breathe every day. And literally, it can just be sitting there and breathing. Social media. Self-care is not just adding things to our world. Sometimes it's taking things away. So social media, taking that away, learning to say no. Some of you are givers and you are willing to sacrifice your own sanity and your own well-being for those around you. Sometimes it's okay to say no. You know, like at work, yes, I'm more than willing to work extra hours, but you know what? At this point, I have to say no to this because then it impacts my walking time. Or at lunch, you have to be very intentional that you take breaks. You do not win a medal at the end of life where somebody gives you a medal because you never took a break and you never took lunch for the betterment of kids, because really you're only better for kids when you're taking care of yourself. Make sure that you connect with other people. You have to have your village. Who are the people that lift you up? Make sure they're in your world too, and you have access to them a lot. There's a lot of apps. Marco Polo's one where you can record video messages back and forth and look at them when you can. There's all the FaceTimes. There's Netflix and Party Netflix or something like that, right? There's Google Hangouts. There's lots of opportunities to digitally connect with loved ones. If you want this to last, it has to be part of your routine. So whatever you choose to do, you're going to garden. I highly recommend you get out in the sun. If there's nothing else you do, and it doesn't have to be a vigorous, you're running 18 miles, just to walk around out in the sun, what's happening is you're absorbing vitamin D, and vitamin D is an essential vitamin that makes us feel happy. So if you're not in a good place, part of it might be your vitamins too. I highly always recommend to people, go get a basic multivitamin, start to take that and watch your mood improve. There's a lot of research on probiotics because it impacts that gut health. So you want to make sure that you're doing some of these basic, what we consider low-hanging fruits, to take care of yourself. And then eating well. You know, I recognize that sometimes eating well can feel more expensive. As a single mom that has absolutely lived in poverty more than once, you have to be very careful and you have to be intentional in what you're giving yourself access to, because it does require a little bit of brain power, knowing that sometimes that processed food is a lot cheaper and easier to access. So sorry, it's a little lagged here. The ultimate goal is we want to decrease that cortisol and increase those endorphins. And so we talked about some of these, but I do want to emphasize number 4 too. If your brain is like mine, sometimes when it's feeling anxious, it can kind of hijack itself. And so you want to do what we call mind disrupting things. So those can be things that require you to think and not just perseverate. So whether that's you're playing a game with somebody, you're engaging in a puzzle, books, Sudoku, sometimes, and I just saw a good, I don't know, webinar or something about this, we think things like just coloring or just walking, those can be good mind disruptors, but they can also allow us to perseverate on what's going on. So you want something that cognitively requires you to think about something else. So if I'm doing Sudoku, I have to think about those numbers that I'm adding up. It doesn't just allow me to obsess. If I'm playing a game with somebody else, I have to focus on however I'm winning my game. So you have to think of things that challenge your thoughts and don't just allow you to continue to obsess on whatever you're thinking about. And then for those of you that have engaged in some of the trauma-informed care, trauma-sensitive practices, really that's what you're doing on yourself right now, right? Because trauma increases cortisol, and so we say use these trauma-informed practices. Well, you're going to use them on yourself. You need to be able to talk to people about the things that stress you out. And that's what I mean. Surround yourself with your village, those people that you don't worry about if they judge you, that you can share what's frustrating you, that they don't necessarily try to fix it. Sometimes when we talk to our partners or if we have a spouse, that can be frustrating if they don't receive it well. So finding other people too, friends that get it. And it might be people that you work with too, especially if you're trying to talk about something that's you know, if you have a partner that works in a cubicle, they don't understand what it's like to work with a kiddo that's struggling. You need to do things that also reassure you that you're safe, that you are safe, especially if you're engaging in COVID and social distancing in light of COVID. Making sure that you're doing things to keep yourself safe helps. You're loved. Gotta, again, surround yourself with that village that reminds you of that. And then those connections and those relationships, those are the things that help to also decrease the amount of cortisol that we are having in our brains. Now, as we start to re-engage with students, I know some of you have young kids that whether you're in a daycare setting and you're still open or your school programs and you're not, you eventually will have access to kids again. And folks, I'm going to tell you the impact on this is you're going to feel it 6 months from now. So you'll feel it 2 months from now. You'll feel it 5 years from now. You're going to have to remember that this experience with COVID, it's not going to magically go away regardless of the governor or the president says, yeah, we all go back to school or work or whatever, because kids were thrust out of their routine just as much as you were. And so for them, and they're seeing how adults are handling it, and some adults are struggling. And so young people mimic some of that too. So you want to make sure that with them, we're building relationships and giving them opportunities to build relationships with you, with each other, with their families, with kids in other settings, with community. Do as much of that as you can now, especially even if you're not seeing them. How can you reach out to those kids? How can you just pick up the phone? Can you do digital things, writing them a postcard? Because right now we're in prevention. Prevention means that we're trying to build up these connections and building up these things now so that it reduces the impact later. And for each of you, that might look different just depending on your setting. Coping skills, trying to also embed those, not just with your young people, but with yourself. Be a model of that for the young people you work with. Don't walk around trying to be on a pedestal, because it's not realistic, right? You know, as humans, one of the worst things we do for young people is try to model that we're perfect, and we're not. Now, it doesn't mean that they see you in the fetal position crying in the corner. What it instead means is, you are talking with them and you say, you know what, I'm just stressed. I had to chase my dog this morning, which incidentally I did because my dog found a baby bunny and I had to tear it out of her mouth. It was rough. I could use that as an example with the young people I work with and say, you know what, let's just all take a few deep breaths because I need to come down a bit to keep going with this. That small 30-second comment can be a lifelong skill I just embedded in one of my students. Okay, doesn't have to be big stuff, but be intentional. You know, week 1, this, I'm going to make sure we do this now. Week 2, this. And it can be things like teaching them how to breathe. It can be, can you even do some digital online concerts with kids? And week 4, you know, offers like writing letters and postcards, but be intentional with whatever you do. And then perfect, I left just enough time. This is one of my last little slides here, and I love it because somebody took a picture of it, and it says, in these trying times, remember to love. So if all else fails, it doesn't look graceful, it doesn't look pretty. If I wrote a book on my self-care experience, it's a hot mess half the time, folks. That's why I say find those little pieces. You don't have to have long, beautiful, something that they're going to make movies about in terms of your self-care experience. Make it work for you. And ultimately, at the end of the day, do whatever you need to so that you love yourself. And so, especially if you're a female, because women, we tend to be the harshest critics of ourselves. We tend to feel like we have failed if we do not balance home and work and all of these things perfectly. Another best kept secret is that everybody around you, and I don't know if I can swear on this, so I'll choose another euphemism. Everybody around you is a train wreck. Okay, they're a total cluster. And if they make you feel like they're not, it just means at that moment, maybe they're not, but give it a second because we all get back to that place. But ultimately, at the end of the day, you working with the young people you are working with, you are changing lives, folks. You are the superheroes. You are changing and you are saving lives. You will never get a printout at the end of your career when you retire that says, you know what, when you did that for Johnny or when you talked to Jose that day, it impacted and had the ripple effect of this, this, and this. You'll never get that. But I'm here today to tell you that you are doing that. You are changing and saving lives. But folks, we need you for the long haul. And we can't keep you in for the long haul unless you are taking care of yourselves first. So before I answer some questions, I thought I had a slide in there. I guess I'll keep that up. So I run Please Pass the Love, and we do school mental health across the state. Right now we have on our website a COVID resources page, and we're offering a lot of online digital programming. I'm getting ready, and I've been working literally tirelessly. Talk about bad self-care. I'm almost done though, and I can't wait to go back outside when I'm done, on a academy for support staff, and that would include you. So we're going to offer 5 classes, and you can get badges, or if you do all of them, it's a certification program, and topics like school mental health literacy, self-care is one of them, suicide prevention, what else am I forgetting? Trauma-informed care, and then reducing undesired behaviors. So they're all some really good pieces that if you have time, you can access those. If you want to be on a list to get that information, go to our website and sign up for a newsletter, because as soon as they're released, probably in the next week and a half, then you would be able to access that information and sign up for it. But we do a lot of work with folks just like you that are in the trenches with kids, and we're in it to win it with you. So if there's ever anything I can do to support you, you also see my contact information on here, and I don't normally tell people my own personal work email. I usually route you through our staff in case they can help, but I do recognize you are a priority right now. So if there's ever anything I can do for you, let me know. All right, so now I'm going to open it up, and I've seen that chat just blinking like nobody's business while I have been doing this. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. That way I can see your beautiful faces. All right, and I'm going to scroll back up here and see what we've got. Oh my gosh, where do I even go back to? There's a lot. Okay, normal stress, 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 stress. Severe depression, some of you are really struggling. The suicide number is absolutely terrifying. I agree. Help with groups of kids, age group of kids 6 to 9. So here's the thing. We're talking about the kids that you're working with. Let's even go down to birth. If you're working with infants, there's a few things that you have to keep in mind with kids, and they're the same things that applied to you. One is you have to remind them that they're safe. You have to remind them that they're loved, and you have to have good routines. Once you have those pieces, some of the other pieces that you can embed are age-appropriate coping skills. One is for little kids, we have even online programming where we're just reading to kids. Some of those activities that you're embedding where you're offering opportunities for them to soothe, something that's normal for them, something that's calm for them, and anything with our early childhood that's age-appropriate is feelings. So asking them how they feel, but here's the biggest misnomer, folks, is that we think that young kids, that they understand what feelings are. They don't. And especially some of our young kids come from homes that we don't articulate feelings. So you're going to have to be really explicit and offer opportunities for your young ones of this is modeling how you feel. I feel scared. Look at my face, right? We have to be very explicit, and you can get face cards. There's tons of that kinds of stuff online. But helping them to be able to identify what they're feeling. Because right now, their feeling is just one thing. It's overwhelmed. They don't understand, oh, it's happy, it's scared, it's unsure, it's confused. You're going to want to teach them some of those things. So remember, safe, loved, secure, but we're teaching them feelings, and then we're also teaching them some of those coping skills. And again, it's going to be age appropriate. So if it's my little ones, I'm going to be teaching them things just like breathing, right? Like I get scared, so I take some deep breaths. Online, there is a wealth of stuff out there for little ones on like yoga and mindfulness. Woof Shanti, it's W-U-F, and then second word Shanti, S-H-A-N-T-I. We have partnerships with them. They're out in the East Coast. It's actually a teenage kid that came up with yoga for little ones, and his mom helps him, and they're like developing an empire. But it's a dog. It's, you know, they're in the costume and they're doing the yoga, and little ones love it. If I could do life over again when I was a wee little one, I sure wish somebody would have taught me how to do some of these things. Because now as adults, you have people that will create narratives like that's hokey or it's not hokey, right? You need oxygen for your brain. But when we push those narratives on kids, what we're doing is preventing opportunities for them to embed some of these life habits that would have, if we would have had them as adults, our lives would have looked very differently. Somebody asked about apps, what some of the apps were called. The ones that I referenced were Calm. Sanvelo is a high anxiety, or it's for people with anxiety. It's amazing. It'll allow you to take an assessment when you get into it, and then it programs it for you. And you can have notifications throughout the day. You can have little, you know, there's activities. It just depends on kind of how your assessment goes. It's amazing. Sanvelo, Calm, Headspace, and Relax Melodies is the one that I use at night. Good. I see lots of people talking about those here. Best sleep app. I drink Dr. Pepper. Yeah. So here's the other thing you need to be careful of. Dr. Pepper has caffeine. Alcohol is a whole nother thing. In education, sometimes we say things like, stressful day. I'll be fine when I go have that bottle of wine later. Okay, well, folks, I'll tell you right now, your bodies are more predisposed to addictions now when they're more vulnerable than they even are on a good day. So you have to put yourself in check. And I'll tell you, I mean, I love coffee like nobody's business, but I have to limit it to 2. Otherwise, yeah, I would drink 10, but then I probably wouldn't sleep for a couple of days because my body is also sensitive to caffeine. So be very mindful that your body and your mind, it is seeking happiness and feeling better right now. And it's going to be like a Black Friday special, elbowing other people and things out of the way to make itself feel happy. You have to interrupt it and disrupt it, because if it's heading for things that are long-term not healthy, you don't want that. Because yes, the virus is going to go away, but truly you don't want the chains of substance abuse, alcohol, whether it's alcohol or drug addiction, self-injurious behavior, sex, gambling, things that without certain boundaries are not healthy. Adult coloring pictures, that's amazing. Prayer, faith, those are wonderful things to throw yourself into. More Mountain Dew. Some of you definitely appreciate a good caffeine, and I'll tell you, back in the day, Dr. Pepper was also my spice of life, but I just can't do it anymore. There are high levels of sugar in it. Sugar is something else that will ramp up cortisol, so the more you can remove sugar and processed food, and it doesn't mean that you have to go get everything organic and you're eating like the, caviar of life, but just find that happy medium, right? Slides, I think I sent them to you, the admin team, so you guys can disseminate that in any way that you find appropriate. Younger kids, yoga. Any recommendations on what to do when you have a kid who says they hate everything and don't want to be at daycare and gets moody when you're trying to use coping skills? Hey, yeah. So when we have kids that are in refusal or kids that are not in a good place, first thing that I would ask you is, what were they like prior to this? If those were things that we are already struggling with, then we're going to start to ask some of the why questions, and we could ask that directly to the kids. Why do we hate being here? Why are we feeling that? Sometimes as adults, we make it harder than it is. Kids are a bevy of answers. Just a lot of times we don't ask them. And depending on the age of a child, but even young kids that have any verbal abilities are able to give us something. The second thing we want to, if they don't give us something good, is that we know that there's something going on. So maybe it's anxiety, separation anxiety. They don't want to be away from parents. You would always want to also be talking to families and developing that relationship to try to get some information from parents, because as parents, there's nobody that's more of an expert on your child than you, right? And so we would want to use that. The second thing is that we want to make the payoff greater to do what we want them to do than not what we want them to do. And so sometimes we have to break that down into small things. If we have a child that has gone through trauma or is going through trauma, then that's a very common trauma response. And again, it goes back to that communication. I don't have good skills, especially when I'm a kid. Even as an adult, I suck at communicating a lot of the time. I don't articulate things very well 100% of the time. So things that you could do for that would be, reminding them they're safe, they're loved, getting them into a routine, but then also offering choices and options. So I understand you don't want to do this, so here are your choices right now. First, we can do this, and then we can do that. But again, we want to make the payoff greater. And so sometimes with those behaviors, we want to ask the why, because we want to understand, what's the reason for the behavior? Are we trying to escape something? Are we trying to gain something like attention? And if that's the case, we want to set it up to be a win-win. So first, you have to pick up your toys, and then you get to have lunch with Sally, or I don't know, whatever it is. But then those coping skills, sometimes kids will make it look like they don't care what you have going on or what you're doing, but they do. And sometimes the kids that show you the most, what you assume is they hate you, it's not, they love you, but they just don't have the good words to do it. So keep at it. Hannah, am I totally out of time for more questions here?
We are just after time, but I was going to say maybe we could have people leave the questions and we could follow up with you if anything comes out. Would that be okay?
Oh, absolutely. You just tell me what you want me to do and I'll do it. And you all have my information too, so you can always reach out if you have specific questions. I don't know that there was actually any questions left anymore, so.
Thank you so much. That was amazing. And like many people in the chat said, it was really timely. I know it hit really close to home for me. And so I would usually say, let's give you a round of applause. So I'll do a little one here for you. But thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you for being here.
Well, thank you for all of you for what you're doing, because you're up against a lot right now, but I got your back. You just let me know what you need, okay?
Thank you. So to wrap it up and to respect your time, we have a lot of resources, so I'll kind of gloss over the resource spotlight today, and we'll follow up tomorrow with all of the apps, the presentation, and the contact information, so be looking for that email tomorrow. That will also include the link to do the survey if you need a certificate or if you're looking to receive DHS credit. Crystal just dropped the link into the chat box. It's a SurveyMonkey link. There it is again. Thank you, Crystal. And I'll wrap up by saying, don't forget, we'll be here at same time, same place next week. Our topic next week will be around social emotional learning. I think. Correct me if I'm wrong. Is that right, Mallory and Teresa?
That's right. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So,
So I think that wraps it up. Thank you so much for being here today, everybody.
Quick question.
Yeah.
Is that on the DHS training registry?
The link?
Yes.
No, the class for next week.
Not yet. It will be very soon, Christina.
Okay. So all the classes you have coming up, you're going to link them to the DHS registry, and we can just go. Will they all be at this time?
Yes, they're scheduled Thursdays through the end of May. So I think that means we have 4 more. So Thursdays at 1 o'clock, May.
Okay. Is there a way? Okay, I do have another question. Is there a way to do like a group? So I just happen to have today off, but when I go back, I know some of my coworkers are interested in doing some online since a lot of the face-to-face classes have been canceled. So is there a way to do it as a group setting?
I'm going to let maybe Crystal jump in here to answer that question.
Yeah, Christina, it's something that I think we would consider, but we would need to have a little bit more information. So I'm going to put my email address in the chat box. Why don't you send me an email and let me know what you're thinking, and then we'll take it to the coaches and we'll do some discussion and think about if that's going to be a good use of time and resources. But I'm sorry, my dog just went crazy. So
that's okay. My kitty, he's around here somewhere. I'm often back and forth on me. I think he went to sleep. He has this thing. He's up when I'm asleep, and I'm up when he sleeps. So okay. So go to SurveyMonkey, and I'll be able to get a certificate through that, right?
yes, when you log on to the survey, there will be a question that will ask you if you need a survey. If you click yes, it will ask you for the information required to get that survey then.
Survey or certificate?
Sorry, certificate.
Okay, I was just making sure. I was like, okay, is it a survey? Because I want the certificate, but I need to know.
Yeah, no, you're not signing up to take a survey, to take a survey, to take a survey. I'm just.
No, I hope not. One survey is all I can do. Okay, so I got another question. So I clicked on the link. It's on my clip trace. So when I go out of this and go to like Google search, I just hit the little click mark thing, the little clipboard. I really don't know how to get to that. Did that make sense?
I'm not sure if I'm following you. So.
So when I went to the chat, I pressed it, so it saved to my clipboard. So when I'm completely done, when I come out, you know how you can go to the Google search bar?
Mm-hmm.
If I press the Google search bar in there, if I press on it, I guess, will it come up and I can just push, I don't know. I don't know how to get to this stupid SurveyMonkey. I'm telling you, I'm illiterate. Not illiterate. I can read just fine. I'm talking about this whole technology stuff. I am not tech savvy at all.
Okay, so Christine.
I'm really confused with what I'm trying to say. I know what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to get to the survey, and I wonder if I press on the Google search bar, if I press it, will my clipboard come up and I can just put it in there like that?
You should be able to copy and paste it from the chat bar. Is that the question?
Yeah, I was able to copy and paste it, but now what do I do with it?
Just push enter and it'll take you there.
Mm-hmm.
Enter what?
It'll take you right
Okay,
to the
so
survey.
when I hang up, what do I do?
So just like we did the test for for Julie, when you copy and paste it in your URL window.
I wasn't able to do the test. I wasn't able to do the test. I only saw it on her screen.
Okay. So
Me
in
too.
the chat box, you'll copy and paste, then go to Google and put
Okay.
it in the URL where you put the
Okay.
URL address, and then hit enter, and then it should pop up.
Oh, see, that's what I was trying to ask. I'm so glad that somebody understood what I was saying.
It'll also be
Okay.
included, if you have any trouble with it, it'll be included in a follow-up email tomorrow from Crystal. So that would be an okay time you could click on it there directly.
Yeah. Okay. So if I can't get it this way,
Exactly.
I'll just have to wait for tomorrow.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
Will I have to listen? Will I have to listen through the whole presentation again to get to it?
No.
No. Okay. And you'll have the classes linked to the DHS registry when?
Sometime next week.
Okay. So next week is when you have class, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Next Thursday?
We'll talk about the descriptions on Monday, and then it takes just a little bit of time to get it preloaded into the DHS website. So I would say that it will be active late Monday or early Tuesday.
And what will be, yeah. Do you know what it's on? Do it like next one's will be about?
Next week is about adult SEL, adult social emotional learning.
I'm sorry, what?
It will be based on adult social emotional learning.
So
So
that won't be like early childhood education?
No.
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 Not directly.
So-
We're hoping that it would indirectly support you, but the topic is just around what is the definition of the social emotional learning in adults and how might you support that?
Okay, when's the next one more focused like on the child will be?
Just so you know that we decided to take a different approach for our professional development this time around. We're focusing on the adults. Yeah, a lot of the things that we do in the past was focus on youth. We decided to focus on the adults because when you guys go back into,
I haven't ever stopped. So everything's still normal for me, actually.
Okay.
That's why I don't think I'm really stressed because everything's normal. Nothing's really, really changed when it comes to like the work aspect and all that stuff. The only real change is I can't go to the mall. I can't go to the thrift shop. And church is like a revolving door. You go in, you go through prayer and you walk back out. That's the only real difference. But everything else I've been doing every day. What I do every day, I do every day. Today is the day I actually had off. Usually, though, I'm working 7 to 5:30 every day. So nothing in that aspect has really changed for me.
I'm going to ask this question, Christina. Christina, I'm going to ask this question. Like I said, we focused on the adults this time around because we wanted, it may not have changed for you, but our kiddos, it has changed tremendously for our kiddos.
Yes.
Not able to go to your friend's house to play, not able to go to the park, not able to go, now Adventureland is open, we can't go to Adventureland, you can't go swimming. I mean, it's a complete change. So we wanted to make sure that the adults were in a good headspace before they went and dealt with kiddos.
Okay. Well, yeah, that makes sense.
Does that make sense?
We all still, even without COVID, we all need help sometimes. I mean, life is life. I mean, but yeah, I honestly really don't watch the news. I rarely will listen to it. I'm not on social media, so it's just what I hear. Somebody may be talking about it, but I mean. But yeah, I still like, so will it be, my question is it going to be DHS approval?
Yes.
It will be DHS. So through the early childhood, how we have to go through the trainings and all that stuff to get those 10 hours.
Yes.
It will be approved by DHS?
Yes, it will be.
Okay. Now I have another question.
Oh, Lord.
With the CDA, what will it fall under? Professional growth, or how,
If I can jump in, we will be deciding all of this on Monday. We know that the next session for next Thursday is on strengthening social emotional learning in adults, and then the following week will be STEM at-home challenges. But we will hammer out all of the details that you'll be able to find and search online, like Crystal said, late Monday or early Tuesday for the following ones. And then in the email that we send out tomorrow, we will make sure to include the schedule for the remaining 4 CIOST Reimagine series that we have and descriptions for those. So be on the lookout for those. And then just in the interest of everyone's time, because I know we all probably have some other meetings and we've seen some kids need to get on Zoom for school. If you have any one-on-one questions, Crystal has included her email in the chat box, and we can include our coaches' emails in there. And so if you have any individual questions, feel free to contact us directly and we'll be more than happy to answer some of those one-on-one questions.
Okay.
Thank you, girls.
Thank you.
Mindy's done.
I'll probably see y'all next week.
See you next
All
week.
right.
Look forward to it.
Bye.
Bye.
Does anyone else have remaining questions that's online before we sign off for the day?
No.
No? Thank you so much for attending.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
How do I get out of here now?
Are we all good to
Yeah, we're
end
good.
for the day?
Yes.
All right, I'm going to stop
Yeah.
it.